Good morning, everyone. My name is Justin Sears, Product Marketing Manager at Hortonworks, and it's my pleasure to host this webinar on HDP Advanced Security. Before I turn it over to Balaji Ganesan for the presentation, I just want to cover a couple of administrative items. All attendee phone lines have been muted. If you have any questions during the presentation, please send them via WebEx chat to either Balaji Ganesan or Bosco Durai. We'll take time to answer those towards the end of the call. And if we don't have time to answer all of your questions, we'll cover them in an upcoming blog post. So let me hand it over to Balaji Ganesan. Take it away, Balaji.
Thanks, Justin. Good morning, everyone. My name is Balaji. I'm here with my colleague Bosco. We both come from XA Secure, and with the acquisition of Hortonworks, we are now part of the broader Hortonworks security team. So today we are very excited to talk through what our product is today, the current state with the acquisition of XA, where the security lays, the current state of security within Hadoop, and what the vision we have moving forward in terms of security, and what are the things we're going to be doing in the next few months and over the course of the next few years. So very excited to be here. So we'll do a presentation, quick presentation, just to give an overview. Then I'll turn it over to Bosco to do a demo of the HDP Advanced Security solution. It's GA today. And then we're going to round up, as Justin said, with Q&A towards the end of the presentation. Okay? So let me start off with talking about a few things. So what does security mean in Hadoop today? So what we see today is with the advent of Yarn, and if you've seen across the adoption of Yarn from Hadoop 2.0, with the advent of Yarn, enterprises today have an ability to run multiple workloads within the same platform. They can run batch workloads, interactive, real-time. It really means that we're giving a platform where they can run multiple sets of data, run deeper analysis, and derive more value. And which also means that they have now an ability within the same platform to have different business user groups come in and do their analysis, and have the ability to look through this analysis and derive value from a single data set. Where Hortonworks is building towards is we are trying to build this blueprint for enterprise Hadoop, driving towards modern data lake architecture. And we are focusing on increasing on 5 pillars across governance and integration, data access, security, operations, and data management. Trying to tie this together and provide a platform which is ready for adoption for enterprise, which they can take this and adopt and move towards what they will do in a data lake architecture, run their own multiple sets of workloads, run different use cases, and really want to make sure this is a platform, enterprise-ready platform when we launch it. And part of the platform being an enterprise-ready is having a robust security around the platform. And this is the enterprise need of the enterprise customers today. And we're delivering comprehensive capabilities today as well as in the near roadmap future. Where we see security is we believe Hadoop needs a comprehensive security approach. Comprehensive means that we look across the whole platform and look at from a CISO standpoint and say, are we securing the whole platform? Are we securing all aspects of data flows? The data can come in through multiple access points into Hadoop today. Data is stored in HDFS, while it can be accessed in multiple ways. You can run your own MapReduce, you can run your own jobs, you can use third-party BI applications on top of Hadoop, or you can use Hive to run SQL queries, or you can use Storm for streaming data, or you can use Solar for search. So there are multiple access points where users can access data. There are multiple places where data is stored and processed. What really needed from a CISO standpoint is looking across the whole platform and saying, are we securing all points of data flow and data processing? And that's where the comprehensive security means. Comprehensive security also means that we're looking at all aspects of security. And security would mean authentication, authorization, audit, and data protection. And we want to make sure we provide this approach with a centralized administration feature, which really means that for security administrator, they want to go in one place and manage the security for the entire platform. And they don't have to worry about going into each of the components. And Hadoop is growing bigger and bigger in terms of components, going into each of the components and managing security. And so how do we tie this together? How do we tie the comprehensive security across the platform, making sure we are addressing all aspects of security, having a centralized management layer, and providing a consistent integration? That's the mandate we have today as Hortonworks security team, and as part of the solution we are delivering today. And that will be the vision of how we will drive things within security. So towards these things, Hortonworks acquired XC Secure. We completed the transaction last month, and we have done the first level of integration within the Hadoop platform. And today we're going to be announcing around how the product is available. But slowly the team and the product will be merged fully into Hadoop, and will be providing security across the three aspects that I talked about. So let me talk about a few examples, and some of you would be looking at Hadoop and say, what does security really mean in terms of real-life use cases, right? So let me take an example here. And this example is you have multiple databases where you would need where you're putting in data. And this here within the same platform, you're having data from marketing, HR, and finance in terms of few tables. And you would have different user groups trying to access the data for their different needs, right? So you may have an analyst team who is looking across all of your data, but as a policy, they may not have access to any personal information. So anything deemed personal may be excluded from their analysis, right? And you may have specific business groups coming and accessing the data, but as per the business policies, they can access only data specific to their business groups. And then you may have security auditors coming in and trying to access from a platform perspective, and say, who has accessed all the data and who has all the privileges, which are the users coming in, what kind of data it is, and what if are we meeting the compliance needs in the specific industry. Now, imagine now this expands into larger sets of groups and larger sets of users, and as you build your data lake architecture, the needs in security, the kind of security needs becomes more complex. And that's where we as Hortonworks, we would like to come in and provide a solution that helps you as a platform perspective. So it's not just tables and columns. I mean, if you think of HDFS, you think of a file system, and you will have a very similar need if you're just using HDFS as a layer and building an applications on top of it, where you may have data scientists running MapReduce and access to all files, while you have specific business groups having access to data only specific to that group. So you may need to think about and plan progressively as you're going through the Hadoop journey on if you're building this data lake kind of architecture where multiple sets of user groups, and you want to have a single source of data, single platform addressing all sets of data, how do we address all the security needs? It's something that needs to be planned early, and we can help. What we are bringing today as part of Advanced Security with the acquisition of XA, as we are adding value across all the pillars in security. And I'm going to talk about authentication, which is making sure the user is trusted. The authorization, making sure the trusted user only have access to the data they're supposed to have by the policies. The audit part of it, where they have, we are able to maintain accountability of the system, making sure we are tracking what the users are doing and making sure they are it's meeting the compliance standards for the specific industry. And how do we make sure this is all tied to a centralized security administration? And so with HDP, we continue to work on the authentication side. We continue to work with as Kerberos as a standard within the cluster. And any new components we are trying to bring in HDP, we try to make sure it runs with Kerberos as the standard within the Hadoop platform. And we think it's a good standard. And we want to standardize on Kerberos within Hadoop. We also offer Apache Knox, and Apache Knox serves you specific needs around if you're using REST APIs or web HTTP calls. into Hadoop. You're using web HDFs, for example. Knox serves as a very good solution in terms of securing the perimeter and having a gateway into your cluster. And you can segregate the cluster from your users in terms of the users don't have to know the topology of the cluster. They don't have to know where the name node is or where the HDFS Hive server is. And then you can, if you're exposing APIs, Knox serves as a very good way you can authenticate the users as well as you can give them authorization to do specific services. So we continue to see a big value of Knox adding as a gateway for those REST services and web HDFS kind of HTTP protocol. From an authorization perspective, we are adding a lot of work around ensuring we do fine-grained access control across the components. And today we offer fine-grained access control as an HDFS, Hive, and HBase. And this is tied to role-based policies that I'm going to talk about in a centralized administration. So we give a framework for the enterprises to set the policies in a central manner while we take those policies and enforce it across the components. And enterprises don't need to go and manage security at the individual level. The third pillar is around the audit and making sure, and we do extensive audits around the three components that we secure: HDFS, HBase, and Hive. And we collect a lot of information around the user request. For example, we know what IP address they are coming from, what resources they are trying to access, whether this access was granted or denied. And we collect those information, those actions, put it in a central database and report on it, and the centralized auditing. And we audit not only ourselves, we also audit ourselves in terms of what actions are being performed, what rule changes, policy changes are happening within our system. And tied across all these pillars is the centralized security administration, which is we provide a very intuitive UI, which we're going to cover in the demo. A very intuitive UI where you can go and express your policies in a very easy way, very flexible manner of expressing policies. And there's a lot of policy optimization here in terms of how you can manage those policies. We also support delegated administration, which means that you can pick a particular resource, it could be a file folder, and designate a business group admin to manage those policies for those files or folders. Excuse me. Which really helps you in decentralizing the administration as you go and expand this platform across hundreds and more than hundreds of users. You may want to decentralize how specific data sets are managed and which business groups or admins can go and manage those policies themselves, rather than you being the central point for administrating all policies. So in terms of features, what we offer today, like I talked about, we continue to have Kerberos as the internal cluster authentication support. We propose Knox for perimeter security. For authorizations, we support fine-grained access control in HDFS, HBase, Hive. We support up to column level in Hive. We support a pretty broad base of permissions, and we're going to cover that part of the demo as well. We cover pretty broad base permissions in terms of both on the HDFS side and Hive and HBase. And in terms of auditing, we support extensive auditing, and including of policy auditing, which is auditing our own policy changes. And you can have all this auditing viewable to a central reporting framework. And we support a lot of management capabilities in terms of synchronizing with your LDAP in terms of users and groups, having single pairs where you can express your policies while we take those policies and distribute that to the components where it's actually being enforced. Rounding off, what's available today is in the first week of June during Hadoop Summit, we released a packaged VM sandbox that's available, that if you want to test drive the entire security features that I talked about, you can go ahead and take a look at that. And today we're doing a webinar, and we're also announcing GA. And towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to point you to places where you can go and download. this add-on, this advanced security solution, so that you can go and start playing around with it. But core fundamental of our philosophy is to make this an XA. We were a proprietary solution, but we wanted to, as Hortonworks, we are completely committed to open standards. So we want to take this and create an Apache incubation project and commit the work we have already done into that incubation project. And that work is planned over the next few months, and that becomes core philosophy that everything we do will ultimately be part of the Apache project and completely open sourced. And we will continue to build the solution in an open framework with APIs exposed, that the community can take this and integrate into other products or enhance it. And ultimately, we believe that as a community, we can evolve much faster than one company doing it alone. So with that, what I would do is I would turn it over to Bosco for a demo around some of the concepts, some of the features that I talked about around authorization and audit. And then we will come back, walk you through where the solution is available in the platform, and then we can run through all the questions.
Hey, Balaji, thanks very much. So let me start with the HDP Security Administration Portal. Using this portal, you can manage all the repositories that is in your Hadoop environment. When I say repository, I mean HDFS clusters, Hive instances, and HDP instances. You can also use this tool to centrally monitor all the audit logs that happens in this component, whether it's HDFS, Hive, or HBase. So as I mentioned in the policy manager, you can actually manage as many clusters as you want to. It's pretty straightforward to add a new one. You can click the add button, give a name to your cluster. You can give the path to your HDFS. And if you want to enable autocomplete, you can also give a user in your cluster. We prefer that you create a separate user who has only read permission to the cluster. Then you can do a test connection, and if it is good, you can add it. Once you add it, pretty much you can go into the policy manager and add more policies to it. So I already created another repository with a few policies, 3 concepts. What we'll do is we'll pick one of the policies. We'll try to understand what a policy means in XA and how you're going to define it. So there are 3 main aspects to a policy. One is the resource. Second is the groups and users. And the third is the permissions. The term resource is used very generically within the system. Depending upon the component, it may mean differently. In the case of HDFS, when you say resource, it means files, folders. In the case of Hive, a resource would be database, table, columns. Like in HBase, it could be column families and column qualifiers. Then the second aspect is the groups and users. These groups and users are what you have set up in your Hadoop environment. If you are using Kerberos, this will be unique users and groups, similarly unique users and groups. If you configure your Kerberos to use LDAP, then these groups and users could be LDAP users and groups. What we do within our system is we provide synchronization tools where you can configure a service to pull users and groups either via LDAP or from your Unix system directly. If you don't want to do synchronization with your existing authentication repository or user repository, you can also create users and groups within our system. We do propagate these users and groups into Hadoop, but so it's your responsibility to make sure the same users and groups are available however you configure your Hadoop. And the third aspect is the permissions. The permissions are also very specific to the components you're configuring. If it is Hadoop, you're kind of referring to read, write, execute. If it is Hive, it will be a lot more richer, closer to the SQL, select, update, insert, and other actions. While in HBase, it will be whatever HBase supports. So let's take a step back and look into how you're going to define a policy. The way we look at Hadoop is a paradigm shift from a traditional way. In the traditional way, you have file folders of your databases, but the sheer amount of quantity, the number of objects you may have in HDFS could be in millions, and that keeps on growing. So if you start giving permissions on each file and folder level, then it's extremely difficult, almost impossible to manage it. So if you want to change the policy, if you want to remove things, it's extremely difficult. And if you want to do a query, the result will be so much that you can't manage it. So what we recommend is you should try to group all similar resources into one policy. And we support some good features like wildcards, as well as you can have recursive. Using that, you can easily have very generic policy which can apply for a large set of objects. For example, if you have a PII information and you don't want everyone to give access to it, so let's assume you have a CDRs and recharges, and assuming recharges has some billing information and some other credit cards, other information, then you can give permissions to only CDR files. What that means is automatically this user, whatever we want to be setting out here, only this users only can only access the CDR files, even though the folder contains recharge or other information. And since you're using a wildcard, if you are having a nightly job of pulling in more data, it will automatically be applied for the newer file. So you don't have to manually go set the permissions for each and every file as they come in. Similarly, if you have you could use recursive. So if you have a folder like bill pay and locations, and you want network to give access to it, you can centrally give a permission to the entire folder and all the subfolders underneath it. So it sort of helps you to manage in a much easier way. The other alternative in HDFS would be you have to do a change mode or change ownership and you are recursive. And and there are a lot of other limitations that comes because of that, because if you want to change it, you have to go and change in each and every folder. Where if you want to change anything, if you want to add a new group, all you have to come here and say, I want to give permission to marketing, and we are pretty much done. If you want to remove anything, it's also pretty straightforward. Then we have a concept of centralized auditing. As the auditing in Hadoop, like with the number of requests that comes up, sometimes it will be too much overwhelming to manage that. By default, we enable auditing for all user access, whether it's HDFS, Hive, or HBase, but we give the option to the customer to decide what level of granularity you need. If you don't want to audit everything, assuming you have a lot of data which doesn't have any personal information, and you want to audit a few folders or files or tables which has personal information or has sensitive information, you can selectively turn on and off auditing. You can also turn on and off auditing depending upon who is accessing it. If you're giving permission to a different line of group, you can turn on auditing only for those groups who are not outside your users who are outside your group. Or even in your group, if you have an intern joining in or a contractor joining in, you can selectively turn on auditing for selective users also. So it sort of helps you manage how much auditing you want to do and how you want to control it. Then, as I mentioned, the groups, you can have as many groups as you want to. You can synchronize with your backend. And some of the recommendations that we do is you can have as many rows as you want to. So if you want to give a write permission to a particular group, read permission to a particular group, you can just add a group and give a read permission out here. Similarly, if you want to even go much more further fine grain, you want to give to just a particular user, let's assume you want to give to IT1, and you want to give, let's take this example of read or execute, you can give that permission also. So it makes it much easier for you to add more groups with different permissions, more users with different permissions, and this all are centrally managed, so it's much easier to do a query and find out what sort of permission each user or group has it. Then one final thing in this particular page is we have a concept of delegated admin. As Balaji mentioned, we have a concept that as you're deploying your Hadoop, as you're having more and more clusters and more line of business trying to share the same cluster, you want to make sure that each and every line of business take the ownership of their own data, and they can decide further manage who should access their repository or their resources. Let's assume in this particular case, this data is owned by the networking group. You can pick either the networking group, or you can just pick one user from the networking group and say he's an administrator. And once you do this, when the network one user logs in, he can, this particular user can do the access control or do the policies for all the resources underneath this particular folder. So you can add more, you can further divide the folders into different internal groups and give different administration permissions to the internal users, or you can manage it himself. And this, the good thing is the same features are available for each and every component, whether it's HBase or Hive. You can pick at any given level, the database level or table level, and you can do delegated admin. So sort of you don't want to have a centralized administrator manage each and every permission. So it sort of gives you a very good separation of duty. So I'll just go ahead and save this policy. So if you see, I have a few policies out here. I have a network group out here having access to this folders. There's another folder with customer, and only marketing has permission to this. So I'll just go to you. I'll already log in as network one, and I will go to the file browser, and I'll try to access a folder which network one has access to. So I go to website logs, and I'll open a folder. So since I have permission for this particular folder, I can open the file. It doesn't really matter how you access it, whether you access it with you or whether you're accessing it with command line. It doesn't matter if you're using a MapReduce. No matter how you come into the system, we'll make sure that the proper access is controlled. Now, if you take this particular user, and if I want to go to a location where I don't have permission, so I know that the user doesn't have permission to this file. So if you try to open it automatically at the lower level, at HDFS level itself, we will block the access. What we do is we override the enforcement in HDFS. We do the same thing for Hive and HBase, and we use our policies to determine whether to allow the users or not. The advantage we have because of that is we can support a rich set of policy definition, whether it's wildcard, recursive. As we go forward, we'll be adding more constructs around it, and we don't have to be dependent on the individual policies. The individual policies can still work. We are not. If you don't want to use XA, you can still continue using it. But as you use XA, you can enhance the behavior. Okay. So now let me come back to XA Secure Policy Manager. We primarily looked into HDFS. I'll quickly go through Hive, and then we'll go to the audit afterwards. So one of our goals that we have is we want to give the same user experience to all the repositories, different type of repositories. It doesn't matter whether it's HDFS, Hive, or HBase. Tomorrow, we're going to be supporting a lot more components. all of them will have the similar look and feel. The advantage is from the customer point of view, from the administrator point of view, there's a lot less learning curve, and you can support the same set of policies across the board, whether it is group-wise, user-wise, IP-wise, anything that might have come, time-wise, a combination of them can be accessed throughout all the repositories. And we can take the burden out of these individual components to enforce all of them. Okay. So the main difference that you'll see among the different components are how you define the resource. In the case of HDFS, it was files and folders. In the case of Hive, it is going to be database, tables, and columns. While in the HBase, it is going to be tables and column qualifiers and column families. As we go into supporting more like Knox and others, the resource definition may change. It may be URL or whatever resource Knox supports. The other thing that changes between components are the permission set. What we don't want to do is want to go and change what the component does. We want to use the same terminology and same permissions, but we give a simple uniform way to set it up. So if in this particular case, you have a table customer details, and this marketing user has permission to only do a select on these columns. So let me go to you again and log out and log in as one of the marketing user. And so I will have a demo that is selected. So I'm going to do a query with the list of columns which this particular user has permission. So if you go to the policy management, so for the marketing group has permission to this 6 columns. And so when I run a query out here, it'll take a little while though, it'll come back eventually. Yeah. So I was able to make a query and get the listing of all the rows in that particular table. Now let me do one more query on a column which this user does not have permission to. So this user does not have permission to this particular column. So when I execute this column, I will automatically reject it. What essentially happens is we are overriding the access control enforcement within the Hive to see whether the user has this permission. So out here also, it doesn't really matter how you access it. If you are if you're using a beeline command line tool, or whether you're using any other way, you'll still be able to do the same access control. So let me just run the same thing from a beeline command. So you'll get the same, exactly the same. So you'll get the same error message saying that the user does not have permission on this particular column. So what really happened is, let's go to the audit. One of the cool features that we have is you can go to the audit and can start doing queries. So I can just pick a repository like Hive and see everything that happened within the Hive repository. Who made queries, what queries were allowed, what were denied. I can also just do query on saying who was denied. Some of the cool features that we have in the audit is now you can do a centralized query across different stacks. So if the query that I have right now is for today, repository type Hive, and it was denied. I can just remove this and I can find out all the denials within the system, whether it is from Hive or whether it's HDFS, doesn't really matter. You can find out. What I can do is I can also pick a particular user, like let's say in this case, not MKDG1, and see what denied you had. I can also see what access you made across the stack, whether it is HDFS or whether it is Hive, doesn't matter. So if it could be Edge-based also. So if you want to do some investigation, you can easily go and start doing queries in a very interactive way. So like if you want to change the start date, you want to do for the last 2 days, you can do it. You want to do a older range, you can do it. So we sort of support a pretty flexible way for end users, particularly who are not very savvy into writing database queries, to run these ones. As Balaji might have mentioned, we log whatever that is possible, including IP that are applicable. Okay. Since we are on the audit topic, there are a couple of more things to highlight out here. As we are doing audit on the access log on the component level, we also do the auditing on our own policy administration. This is very critical in enterprises because as per all the compliance requirements like SOX and everything, you have to keep track of what policies were provided, what was revoked. So if there's any ambiguity and any issues, you can go back and take a look into it. So we did some modification for this particular policy today. So what we did was, for marketing, we gave read, write, execute. We gave permission to legal to do read. So at the same time, we also gave administrative function for network one. So all this are centrally available. It's audited at log. So you can easily run queries, or you can look into a particular resource and see who gave permissions, or if you want to do some troubleshooting, you can do it. So all these features are automatically available out of the box for easy management auditing. There are a few other features. So the few other features, I'll probably not won't go too deep into it, but some of the challenges that happens when you have in a big data is when you have systems across the different stacks. You want to run at in one glance, you want to see what permission the group has, the user has it. You can come here, you can see, you can view a group, or you can even do a user and can do a query and can find out all the permission this particular group has it. So it is trying to be more as much as possible as a centralized administration management. Similarly, you can view a resource and can find out everyone who has permission to it. Okay. So these are some of the features I have. So what we'll do is I'll hand it off to Balaji again, and then we open up for questions. Thanks. Justin, can you give it back to Balaji?
Yep, I will. And just a reminder to everybody that there's so many folks on the phone. We won't open the phone lines, but please send your questions to Balaji or Bosco in chat. And I know many have come in, and I've been seeing you answer some of them, Bosco, but let's go through those on the phone just for those that didn't maybe see those chats going back and forth.
Sure. So why don't we just run through the last slide, and then we can run through questions. Yeah.
Great.
Are you able to see my screen? Not yet.
Now I see you.
Okay. All right. So I wanted to wrap up at least the presentation part of it, saying that the solution that we talked about today is available for download. It's available if you go to hortonworks.com/lab/security page. That is our main page for what we talked about in terms of security, our vision. It also contains what we are doing in terms of near-term roadmap, and please keep referring to this page coming back. I'll keep updating in terms of future roadmap as well. It also has a link to download the bits. It will take you to the add-on page where all the bits are available, including the policy administrator, the different plugins or the agents that we talked about. We also have a tool to synchronize groups from the Unix users and groups, so you don't have to manually type in if you need to do that either. The install guide is available. You can go and look through that and go through a very detailed steps of how to get this in your system. So with this, let me end the presentation part of it, and let me start going through the questions. And I'll scroll to the top. If I missed anything, just feel free to send it again. Or if you're not able to cover in this presentation, send us through any of. You can go to the forums and send questions, and we'll try to, like Justin said, we'll try to do a blog or try to cover that in the forums as well.
Hey, Balaji,
so one of the questions.
If you wouldn't mind just staying on this screen so people can go there if they need to while you answer the questions, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions we had was around Knox, and I believe Bosco had responded. So the Knox will continue to be the perimeter security solution for us. So we believe the XA solution adds into the security within the cluster. Knox adds a lot of value as a perimeter gateway. So we're going to be integrating the Knox part of it with the XA bit in future roadmaps so that we are able to manage the service level authorizations through the UI that we have just seen. So we'll continue to integrate, but I think we provide a lot of value as a combined solution. Okay. There was another question around data at rest. Again, it's a very broad topic, and it's a very interesting topic. So data at rest, when it comes to encryption or masking or data protection, there are multiple ways enterprises are approaching it. And again, the evaluation is the security is in layers, and you would need to have the basic layers in terms of authentication, authorization, your outer perimeter security, and firewall. And then you're really evaluating on what kind of data you need to encrypt. Do you need to encrypt the entire data system, or do you need to encrypt a certain file or folder or specific data if your sensitive data is very small part of that whole data portfolio? So people have gone through encryption in terms of volume encryption or file-way encryption. What we support as part of Hadoop is encrypting data in flight. So your communication and data coming in and out is secure and supported as part of the HDP as well. We support natively out of the box any encryption done through the Linux operating system through Lux. And again, that's transparent encryption to us. Hadoop works out of the box for Lux encryption if you want to prefer that. If you want more advanced encryption, we have incredible partners that are available. With us Protect, Voltage, and Data Guide, and others who offer very rich and cross-enterprise encryption solutions. So you really need to look at what you really need to do in the encryption. Again, encryption could be broken down into the enforcement, into the cryptography, and into the key management part of it. There are many enterprises who already have their own key management server, which that they like to leverage over Hadoop. And our mandate is we work with our partners, say if they can help address that part of areas where enterprises would like to use their own cryptography or key management, and how we can support those use cases as well. So moving forward, there is work within the community happening in terms of supporting better enforcement of encryption in HDFS, as well as this movement towards supporting encryption at column level and high. Some of the partners are able to do it today, but they are working around the limitations of the platform itself. So our mandate as a security team and as part of the community is making sure we provide capabilities in the platform for any enterprise, any vendor to add on and enhance the security. So in terms of plugins or enforcement points, that will be our continued play in this market. There was the other questions around Kerberos. There was a question on Kerberos. Yes, it is a little tricky and hard. Kerberos is the standard we are proposing, but as part of roadmap, as part of making this enterprise ready, we're going to continue to look and see how we can make it easier to install and manage Kerberos. Today you can manage some part of the Kerberos configuration through Ambari in HDP, but we continue to look and see if we can minimize the ease of installing, implementing, and configuring Kerberos. Absolutely, but it will be continued to be a standard. And in near term, or maybe in long term, we will also look at within as a platform, as the community itself, see if there are any alternative standards to Kerberos that we can look at. So there was also a question around using the native ACLs, that's extended ACLs that's available today. As the Bosco has said, in order to do an enforcement, we kind of do our own enforcement across the components today. And so if you set permissions to ACLs, that stays as it is, and we kind of ignore that because we look at our own policy database to see what policies exist. But the movement towards near future will be to see if we can support both capabilities in an integrated way. So for customers who wants to set policies locally through command line, and as well as coming through a UI or any other way, can we have a single version of truth in terms of policy? So that's the work we'll continue to do in that way. But today it exists as standalone. There was, I'm scrolling through questions again.
Yeah, just on there's a question about Hive. So the same philosophy applies all over the place. Right now we override the Hive as well as for HDP, but the goal is to make sure that when you do a grant, we'll be supporting the ATC command line thing. When you do a grant, those policies will be automatically created within the our policy manager. Hive and HDF is much more easier to manage from command line, but HDF is just a little tricky because you have so many objects and so many permissions. It's a nightmare.
Yep.
And saying that, just one more thing I want to add. Most of the customers that we've been talking to, instead of command line where you need to install command line tools and everything, they are preferring more of an API-based access. So that is one of the things. We already have API-based. It's not publicly available right now, so we'll be exposing it so that enterprises who have their own metastore or other ways to manage policies can integrate seamlessly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there was a question around setting policy access to a table, but what happens to the underlying HDFS files folders? And so it really depends on how we set up Hive. And Hive can be set up to run as a Hive user to access the data on the HDFS side, or it can do a do as. There are pros and cons, and really we need to, when you go and do an implementation, we need to look at what use cases it's supporting. If you are able to run as Hive user, then the users are pretty much restricted to Hive, and then you can have a column level security at Hive, restrict them what access they are giving. Well, it's only the Hive user which is accessing the underlying files at HDFS. But there are certain enterprises who may choose to do a do as, which means there are users who are accessing the HDFS layer, and they are accessing we need permissions at the HDFS level as well. The good part about XA is we can control those policies through the central UI as well. So you may end up giving the requisite permissions to the underlying Hive files folders in HDFS through the XA solution, and we will be able to do enforcement. Again, we'll have to look at pros and cons on what solution works better.
Yeah, just one. One of the beauty of this solution is right now you don't have to do as equal to true, because you can still continue using Hive, and the majority of the users still go to the Hive interface. But you may have an odd case, a particular analytics, a particular person who wants to access the file system for the particular table. Then you can selectively go to our HDFS policy management and give permission to that, so they can access. Obviously, when you give access to the folder containing the table, that person may not, the column level permission may not be applicable anymore because you can read the entire thing. From the enterprise point of view, it's going to be primarily the best practice. If you have all the customers having access to Hive, then probably doesn't really matter. But if you have only very few, then start with the Hive, to assess false, and then you select two as you're going forward. And no matter how the user access, it will always audit it, so not better track record right now.
Yeah. So there was a question on how do we enforce it within HDFS. So our philosophy is that we want to be in the path of all the user requests coming in. So in Hive, we are at Hive Server 2, and HBase, we are at Region Server. For HDFS, we are at name node. And HDFS today, doesn't have a fully developed API that we can use in terms of authorization. So we kind of embed within the name node processes and enforce the policies at that level.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway is we are within the process and all these components. That gives us a lot of advantages because there's pretty much no override of going to a remote server to get the policies in real time. So it's super fast, and almost since you're overriding the existing access control, the delta between the overhead is much smaller.
So one thing on HDFS is we do allow the HDFS native permissions to be a secondary authorization layer, and that is a configuration we give an option. So you can have the XSave or the portal be the primary authorizer, but you can give an option to, if you don't have any policy, to check the XSave, the HDFS native ACLs to see if there is this permission existing. And that it helps a little bit when you go and take the solution and install in an existing customer who is running MapReduce or jobs which are looking at native permissions. And you may not want to break that in day one. So we give you an option to have that configuration where you still can use the Hadoop permission set as a secondary authorization. But at some point of time, you want to progressively move towards a single view of all permissions. So you may extract those permissions and put this in XSave and have the XSave part of it being the sole authorizer. So there are options available, and depending on where the journey is, if there is a new customer starting new, they can start off with all permissions in XSave and turn off just be the XSave being the single enforcement point.
There's a question about AD and LDAP integration. Yeah, so right now, currently out of the box, we support both AD and LDAP. And also, if you have users in Unix, you can synchronize that one also. The main purpose of the synchronization is from the administrative perspective, you don't want to guess what the username is and what the group name is. You can give a very easy drop down. Saying that if you have a very small set of users and groups initially using it, you can just use our native user management to add the users and groups, but you're responsible to make sure that you don't do any typo, anything like that. You can use export input features. So this will show up in the drop down, and you can give permission. Also, on the topic of LDAP and AD, the portal itself is being configured to authenticate against LDAP, even Unix service. If you have users and passwords in a Unix file system, you can use that also. In addition, we have our own internal user repository.
Yeah. All right. So a couple more questions I'll take. There was a question on whether the UI is part of Ambari. Currently, no, but that's the vision we have is we want to make it easier for enterprises, so towards moving a single UI and becoming part of Ambari or Ambari views is something we'll take it in the part of the roadmap. And there was also a question on what the roadmap in terms of integration. So we'll want to progressively look at other components of HDP and Hadoop platform and see what we can secure. So we're looking at Storm. We want to be tightly embedded with Falcon in terms of data governance. So Falcon, I'm not sure if you've gone through Falcon. Falcon is a great tool which enables you to create data pipelines and progressively do data audits and tracking. We want to embed the audit information we collect in terms of security into the data audit information that Falcon collects in terms of which processes run, what jobs, and what data was touched. You want to combine that and give a view for the enterprises on what happened to the data when it came to Hadoop. Who accessed it, what processes touched it, where did it go from point A to point B. And so we have a full graph around that. So we continue to look at that from an integration perspective. And we also want to make sure there are other components like Knox, Storm, which are integrated into XA. So giving a single centralized security administration is something we continue to look at. But keep looking at the labs page, keep checking it regularly. We'll update it with more roadmap items as we go towards this journey. And if there is any feedback, just let us know. You can reach out through forums or any other means. Okay. In terms of architecture documentation, the documentation is available that you see in the labs page. If you go to the bits, there's a broad, big document available which covers through some of the architecture and some of the install process as well as how you use it. Okay.
Balaji, we maybe have time for one more question if there's another question out there.
I think that's pretty much it. I believe some of the other questions were answered by Bosco, but if we have missed out anything, apologies. Just send us across and reach us through the forums as well. We'll try to address in the blog or any other means. So that's it from my side, Justin.
Perfect. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Balaji, and you, Bosco, for all the excellent information on HDP Advanced Security and the very informative demo. And I also want to thank all of you attendees for joining the call. I encourage all of you to go to the Hortonworks website and download the bits for HDP Advanced Security that are now available. And as I mentioned before, recording this presentation and a complete Q&A will be available in an upcoming blog in case you want to refer back to it after the fact. So thank you for joining, and this ends today's webinar. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.